Hey folks, long time no live. Predominantly I'm doing this so that I don't have to edit or do any of that fun stuff that I usually do when I film. So I didn't plan this, and I'm really hoping that the quality is going to go in my favour, basically, because last time I did a live, the internet was so damn choppy that it didn't really make doing a live worth it anymore. So we shall see. But hopefully you can see from the title, I am talking non-traditional decks today, and essentially this was inspired by a video I watched by the Three Fat Readers. So they are three tarot readers who likely need no introduction, but they also have a joint channel. And I can't remember how long ago, but I don't think it was probably this year. They hosted a whole discussion about non-traditional tarot decks, and I really wanted to do a response to that, because the more I thought about it, the more I realised that non-traditional and what qualifies and what doesn't becomes quite subjective pretty quickly, but also by most people's definition, I've got quite a lot of non-traditional tarot decks, so I definitely have a flavour for it. I've also been working on some Patreon stuff today, which meant I had decks out everywhere, and I'm really trying to tire myself out this evening so that I sleep well after quite an intense hospital thing that I had earlier. So this is, I've decided to utilise the time and space and come on and do this. And yeah, people can hopefully watch it back, because I can't imagine anyone being around. You can see here I've got my Lioness Oracle Tarot. I just think that that's a good example to start off with, and I will start going through the decks soon, but I wanted to talk about the concept of non-traditional. For me, I see non-traditional as mostly specific to the system, of course. So we've got systems of tarot, we've got 𝗪𝗂𝗍. I suppose you could argue we have got numerology and pippish decks away from 𝗪𝗂𝗍, so ones that slot in with the numerology and the elements. We've got the RWS and we've got the 𝗨. And I'm talking about tarot specifically. I don't think I've missed anything, but like I said, it's been a long day. But naturally these things are influenced by the art as well, because for me, it could, many decks can say, oh well, I was influenced by 𝗬𝗁 as an example, and then the actual visual depictions are so far from what we're used to seeing. The Lioness Oracle Tarot is probably a good example of that. It feels very 𝗬𝗁. I'll show you a few cards while I'm talking. It feels very 𝗬𝗁 in the book interpretation, and also there's astrology inclusions in there, but for the most part I would say that the book feels very RWS. But the visual depictions for the most part are so out there and so abstract in comparison to an RWS tarot that then, despite it using the system, it's not necessarily a visually clear representation of those box meanings, if that makes sense. Or at least not one set of them. Because of course then you've got the decks that mix systems. I think the Muriel Tarot is probably a good example off the bat. And while I read with a mixture of things that I infuse my tarot with, that's not it's a lot of people's approaches are intricative, but it's not a traditional approach, and it's especially not a purist approach. So there's that as well. I'm hoping that makes sense. Like, I think this is an interesting example, because we often see two of something, often two people. Here we've got two cats on the Two of Cups. So perhaps we're seeing a little bit more of a Rider-Waite-Smith infusion. But then the Seven of Swords with these legs behind the moon, that's not a traditional depiction at all. And so it's not about it just not being a clone or a clone-ish type of thing, but it's that the scenes become less recognisable. And I think that's one of the ways that decks become non-traditional before we talk about how they change the systems entirely. And I suppose that works for many things. Like, I am not very au fait with 𝗨, but I know that 𝗨, essentially you need to stick to keywords, and then some of the 𝗨 decks also stick to certain colour choices as well. Obviously, if you're going to have a 𝗪𝗂𝗍 deck, even if you're changing the art style, if you're sticking to traditional 𝗪𝗍, I told you I was tired, then they're going to be specific layouts. So I've seen very 𝗪𝗂𝗍-esque decks, but the way that they've laid out the minors aren't 𝗪𝗂𝗍 style. And the colours are off-brand and things like that, depending on the system. So they still have the system, they're still infused by it, they're still informed by it, but perhaps they don't stick to all the key facets, or it's not clear enough for you to pick up a RWS book. For example, if you're getting the Lioness Oracle Tarot, you couldn't get an RWS book and then use it to help you understand the system through this deck. So it was intentioned for this deck, but it might not be obvious. You know, you get the sentiment now. So I don't think that it's any one thing for me that makes a deck non-traditional. It's just how much it does something, how far it moves away from an aspect, or how many aspects it moves away from. Because you could really get into semantics and say, well, we look at how many decks change titles, for example. But that doesn't really leave me feeling like they're non-traditional just based on that. So I really wanted to kind of just discern for my own purposes what I meant by this when I feel I'm talking about a non-traditional tarot deck, because like I said, it feels kind of subjective to a point. And so there's a lot of decks that I own that I often don't think of as non-traditional until these discussions kind of start up. And then, like I said, I was listening to the Free Fat Readers and thinking, wow, non-traditional definitely seems to be a flavour that I go for. And I have every faith that you could argue a few of these either way, and I definitely have more than what I've got out, but I didn't want to stay online all evening. And my brain is not on its best form, so it's probably going to take me twice as long to say anything I want to say. But I thought we would just jump into some of my collection and have a look at some of the quote-unquote non-traditional and the variations of like what that looks like and how far that goes in different decks. And I will try and see if anyone talks to me, but it's unlikely. But I can see my dear friend Logan. Hello, my dear. It's good to know that someone's hanging out. I have tried to structure this mentally in a way that it will have replayability, but we will see. So the Lioness Oracle Tarot, the reason I started with this one is because there's this thing about this deck that I have, we'll say, debated with people for a very long time. Not because I care so much, but because it's a genuine misunderstanding. So I don't care how people work with a deck or what they think of a deck or how they use it, or if I love it and they hate it and they want to do a video about how much they hate it, or vice versa. Like, none of those things are of importance to me. I am wondering why I've got ring imprints on all of my cards though. But the thing that happened with this deck when it came out, that there was a lot of discussion about, was it a tarot deck at all? And because it's got the Lioness Oracle Tarot in its name, and it's it's pretty visually abstract in places. And there was, I feel like, less of this out there at the time as well. A lot of people said it's not a tarot deck, it's an oracle, which is fine if we think that's what their experience of it was, that it just, they couldn't read it as a tarot, but they could read it as an oracle. And there are some decks I'm going to show that I would say lend themselves to both as well. But a lot of people founded that on the fact that it was a bit more out there, it was a bit more abstract, and the name. And the creator is called the Lioness Oracle. So all she did, and her name's Alejandra, is title her deck after her tag name. It would be the same as me calling a deck Cosmic Creepers Tarot. So as far as I understand it, from the interactions that I've had with the creator and using the deck and reading the book and all of that stuff, it was never intended to be anything but a tarot. And I think that as long as you're familiar with certain layers of reading the tarot, not that you couldn't start with this, but it would be an interesting ride. But if you're familiar with the tarot and the elements and the infusions, and I'll say ภิðr-Ŵæ-Smith because I think that there's enough of it in places, it's kind of still visible to me in this deck. I'm not saying it would be for everyone, but I found it quite intriguing because I feel like it fell into that place that, what's that deck called? I don't have it. It's been on my wish list for the longest time, but I never bit the bullet and got it. It's old. Is it the Dreams of Gaia Tarot? Now that's a deck, unfortunately I can't show because I don't own it, that has done something completely new with the system. And I think that there's an expansion on the amount of majors or even the minors as well. There's extra cards in that deck. It has its own way of approaching the system and structure, which of course if you've got extra cards, then that's really going to change the vibe. But you could argue that it's still tarot and that it's a new form of tarot, because of course we've then got the discussion, well, these tarot systems exist already, but they were made up at some point. They were made up by a human and developed by other humans and then agreed upon by more humans. What about if someone makes a new one? Who gets to say if it's tarot or not? How do we know? How do we define that? Can it be they go away from the meanings and change the elements as long as it's 78 cards? Like, are we married to the 78 cards? Or is it something else entirely? And I think that that's quite an interesting, at least to me, it's an interesting concept to kind of think about. Logan says, so far so good, I don't mind a deck that deviates from tradition so long as I can make sense of the images or the booklet does a bang up job explaining the artistic choices and all. Yes, and we've had this discussion, haven't we, in private. I would say that when it comes to non-traditional decks, I'm particularly a fan and I'm very good at finding a way to get something to work, and I appreciate that. Firstly, that's not what anyone should have to do or that they want to do. It's definitely something that I enjoy, and I don't mean forcing a meaning on an image, but I'm very good at working with the elements and the numerology or the major arcana archetypes and the artwork that I'm being presented with and sort of moving with it. But I know that a lot of people don't like that. So I definitely feel like non-traditional, and how non-traditional is very much to do with taste as well. These are short meanings, but I thought I would show you before I moved on to another deck. So here we've got the 6 of Cups. It probably would have been good if I'd actually picked a card that I could show you, but I'm going to read this one now. Never mind. The Six of Cups returns to childlike feelings of purity and innocence. Renewal brings the desires for play and light-heartedness, recalling memories from the past, moves emotional waters in positive ways. Meanings, healing the inner child, moving forward emotionally, new fresh feelings that are welcome, nostalgia, a return to positivity and pleasure. And whilst it's, like I said, quite abstract, and of course it's going to be nowhere near the top, some of the things that are in the picture do feel very childlike. We've got a couple of dolphins swimming along, so they're speaking to that kind of... Humans often see dolphins as especially emotionally expressive animals because we like to decide these things about animals. And of course, the way they engage is something that we perhaps find more familiar. And they're often associated with like childlike joy and seeing dolphins and how magical that is. And they're swimming through all of this really, really bubbly water. There's roses, but there's roses in pretty much everything in this. And I'm just not going to be able to find the damn card. But I feel like there's hints. I'm going to give you one more example before I move on. And I'm not trying to sway anyone, I might add. I'm not interested in making decisions for people or any of that. I just thought it was an interesting topic. So the Nine of Swords. Oh, you can't make this shit up. Look, here's the Six of Cups. So we've got starfish, and the starfish are riding magic carpets. So it is a very magical image. It's a very playful image. It can get you there, but it's not obvious. And both the image alone could definitely get me there, and the meaning. And so I don't feel like it's too far that way. But I would definitely agree that whilst this is 𝗫𝗿𝗫𝘁𝗵, this is incredibly non-traditional based on the artwork. But as I've got this out, I'll read this one as well because it's one of my favourite cards. I mean, that to me is hilarious. The Eight of Swords is the unfortunate experience of anxiety. This is caused by constant worry about the future. Healing comes with letting go and going with the flow of life. This shift brings monumental transformation. That's a bit airy-fairy for me in terms of it works because I know the card. Otherwise, it's perhaps not as directly instructional in a useful way. But again, I wouldn't say that this is a beginner deck, and beginner decks are a whole nother discussion. But the meanings sort of redefine this a little bit better. So it says limiting thoughts, inability to be in the present moment, tension, paranoia, feeling trapped, fear of the unknown, and shadow work. So I feel like that fleshes out that, you know, it's all well and good saying to someone when they're experiencing anxiety, go with the flow. It's a whole nother thing, having a concept of how to do that. And that's no shade to the creator. I really like her. I really enjoy her Instagram and her readings, and I love this deck. Do I think there could be more in the book? Yes. But look at this. So we've got this really like blood red, smoky kind of vibe going on, and then there's a cat looking, if you're familiar with cat behavior, very, very unhappy about something, and then this kind of like creepy but hilarious vampire dude, and it's like a mix of nightmares. So I thought that would be a good foundational deck to start off with. So that's the Lioness Oracle Tarot, and that's my first non-traditional. What else have we got? And they are in boxes, so some of them are. This one's not in boxes. Let's go with this one. Let's move a couple of those to the back. I had the aces out the other day for something entirely different. So for those who are not aware of what this is, because it's not in a box, this is the wooden tarot. This came into my collection it was in 2017, but I was, so for those who don't know, I grew up with tarot, but I didn't learn the system in a traditional capacity. I'm not saying I didn't read books that had 𝗬𝗁𝗍𝗁 orientations, but I just assumed that every book had its own kind of deal. And my Medicine Woman tarot came with a tiny little white book, and it could be discussed in here because it's not traditional, but it's not as non-traditional as some of the ones I'm going to show you. So anyway, maybe I'll talk about that. But when I found tarot on social media and in this other weird world that it exists online, I decided to learn the 𝗬𝗁𝗍𝗁, and I probably got this wooden tarot a little bit early into that, but it's one of my favourites. I've done a really long video on it actually, trying to help people through the symbology of it, utilising everything that I recognise in the deck and some very helpful blogs created by some other awesome individuals in the community. So the wooden tarot is not traditional in any sense of the imagination, and honestly the creator, so 𝗫𝗁𝗍𝗁𝗀, but their tag name is 𝗪𝗁𝗁𝗀𝗀, and they have a bunch of decks out. These are all going to be upside down? Yes, they are. And I love their artwork and I love their decks. So I have their Pathfinder, I have their Earthbound. Their Earthbound Oracle in particular is pretty popular in the community. But this is a great example of a deck that's not traditional in any sense of the imagination. And also there's no guidebook to confirm even the system that the creator, or systems that the creator has infused into their creation, or what their knowledge of tarot is. Now, to me, it's very clear that they have a knowledge of tarot based on how usable and readable the deck is. But there is nothing backing this in terms of where and what system. And we've got everything from name changes to very, very spacious, abstract's not quite the word, but spacious, pippish kind of imagery. So the gods are actually the aces, which I really enjoy, which is why I use them for my Patreon picture as the elements. So we've got the gods, they've already been changed, and then the suits have been changed, and we've got bones, plumes, blooms, and stones. That's it. And I think stones and bones is the one that trips people up the most, because in deck changes, it's commonly stones or bones will be used for pentacles, so the earth suit. So when you get both, it starts to become tricky business for people. But sorry, I wanted another example. For anyone curious of how I learned to navigate that in particular, if it is something that won't necessarily stick with you straight off the bat, is that the bones are pentacles, for anyone who's wondering, and the stones are actually the wands, but of course they've got this really wonderful fiery red coloration, and they're often in points. So before we even go into the layers of like thinking about how crystals are formed and how that would fit with the fire element and yada yada yada, you can think red, fire, point, wand, you know. You can really simplify it, basically, is without teaching you to suck eggs. And it's an interesting deck, this one. Some of the animals just look, I don't want to use the word traditional and keep using that word in different variations. So some of the animals are standard and recognizable, like this one, and then you get these really like funky. This fox doesn't have a head, they have a sunflower for a head. And also, like I said, the cards are incredibly pippish. And for those who aren't really familiar with that term, it's like some people will just call the minors in a tarot deck the pips. But pip decks are generally 𝗪𝗂𝗍 decks or numerological decks, which you've got 6 wands or 5 wands for the 5, 4 wands for the 4, 3 cups for the cups, etc. This isn't doing that. It's pippish. It does still have the same amount of mushrooms, so 7 on this bone, which looks like a femur bone. I don't know. But it's not, you know, it's pippish. It's got the qualities of it without following the structure exactly. This is a fun one as well. So the plumes are the swords, and then the blooms are the cups. This is what makes me personally think that this was a 𝗨𝗿𝗀𝗁 infused deck, because it's a 6 of swords and we have the duck, but like I said, this funky ass duck has got 2 sets of eyes per side, and there's a lot of that. There's a lot of eyeballs. In fact, I can't remember what the is it tryptophobia or something like that. If you don't like seeing lots and lots of tiny holes or that kind of vibe, and you have that phobia, I know because my stepmom has it, then you will not like this deck, because there is definitely a triggering card or 2 in it. But this duck swimming away and leaving those feathers is very reminiscent of the 7 of swords in the 𝗨𝗨𝗁𝗁. But then this is the 10 of bones. And I'm not going to talk too much about how we can define this jaw as the 10 of bones, because firstly I do that in the amazingly long walkthrough that I do of it. Well, it's like a walkthrough teaching what's on the card review kind of deal, but more so I just wanted to show examples of why these decks for me, I suppose, meet the very non-traditional criteria basically. But here's another one that's that's a very, very 10 of swords. I find that in a non-traditional deck as well, this brings me to an interesting point, because I'd love to hear other people's thoughts on this, that the majors, even if the rest of the deck is non-traditional, the majors tend, not always, but tend to be more familiar. So in a deck where, that's a great example, that's a great example, that's very obvious. Are there any others? Those 2 will probably do, to be fair. In a deck where, for the most part, aside from this is quite recognisable, where the pips are like, this is the 6 of cups. These 6 glorious eyeballs in what looks like a lily. I mean, I'm not great with my plants and I can't remember everything I said in my walkthrough. And then we've got the 4 of cups, which is this rosebud. But what we can recognise here is it's been plucked from the plant, and it actually looks like it's starting to dry. So it's going through you could argue it's going through the decay process, but what we know is roses preserve really easily like this. So it almost becomes that it's set in stasis, which is really interesting for like the 4 as a foundational structure, especially if you work with the numerology. But this looks nothing like the 4 of cups in the 𝗨𝗨𝗁𝗁. And again, I'm using the 𝗨𝗨𝗁𝗁 based on the fact of this impaled bird for the 10 of swords. So that's not recognisable, that's not recognisable, but we get into the majors, and the Hanged Man is a bat, the World card is a tree, the Lovers has got a heart on it, the Moon has got a moon, Strength is, oh crap, I can't remember the name of this beetle, but anyway, and it's got a diamond there as well, and it's got the infinity symbol. Tower is a tree with lightning. So you can sort of see what I mean very quickly about. It's interesting because it seems like non-traditional decks may go a little bit more traditional with the majors, and then kind of really get expressive in their own way in the minor arcana. So that was something else I noticed. I mean, I do have the 𝗫𝗁𝗀𝗃 Tarot out, but, oh, here it is, wrong side. This is one of the ones that sort of sparks my cheeky bit in the title that says, how far can they stray from the system? Because, like I said, again, super subjective, and a lot of people say that the 𝗳𝗁𝗀𝗃 Tarot, oh, I'm sure that's the name. It's by 𝗲𝘁𝗁𝗀𝗃, is that how you pronounce it? It's a very cool deck, and it finally came out in matte, but I can't find it anywhere online, so you actually have to buy it in store, and I've not seen it. But anyway, she also did the messenger cards, and her deck's been around for an age. But a lot of people will argue that that is not a tarot deck because it strays too far from the one of the traditional 78 card structures. Now, I don't have that deck, so I can't speak to that. But I think that the 𝗫𝗁𝗃 Tarot is a deck that pushes non-traditional for some people, and that they would argue that this is the line. Whereas for me, this works very well. However, the creator did make this so that you could use this as an oracle or archetypal deck, whatever you prefer to call it, without needing to work with the tarot. You're not forced to work with the tarot. However, their book does blend it pretty well. There's less information in the book that you can get now, whereas the Kickstarter book had more personal sort of amendments, isn't the word, additions in it. And having had both, the Kickstarter one is better, and so you miss a little something, unfortunately. But it's still enough to give you their reasoning for each of these. But you can see very quickly there is one symbol, archetype, presence, focus per card the whole way through the deck. And so for the star, we've got the angel, far more recognisable. 10 of Pentacles, the stone. This is a really interesting one because we're so often seeing bottles and vessels of any sort being linked to cups. So I remember getting to this and being like, sorry, what? This is the Ace of Wands? And I really had to sit with it for a while. And I read what they, the creator's name's Dan. I read what he had written about this, but also I was thinking about the concept of like how a bottle can contain so much, especially if you think about spell jars. If you're that way inclined, and like myself, you like the practice of spell jars, offering jars, things like that, and we think about the energy that's contained, and if you work animistically and you think about the energy contained with everything that you put into this container as well, and that the bottle is technically never empty. Without getting too philosophical, even when you can't see anything in the bottle's never empty. So if we think about that as a concept, and that the wand suit is a lot to do with things that we can't tangibly see, but energetic experiences, drive, willpower, our ingenuity, you know, our desires, our urges, then actually the bottle is a really interesting, and for me at least, a fair representation of the Ace of Wands. But you really have to be open to going there with this deck, I feel. Hello to the people jumping in. How are you? Sorry, I was kind of in my own little world then. I wasn't expecting anyone to come. So I think that this is one of those decks that definitely would split. It would split the people. because to me this is a non-traditional tarot deck. To other people, this is definitely not considered a tarot deck. It's too far gone. And so that's why I wanted to sort of extend the question as well. How far can it stray from the system for you? And what is it about the system that makes the system? Which is what the 3 fat readers were saying as well. And I, you know, my memory retention is awful. So unfortunately, I can't remember everything they said. But also, I'm not here to regurgitate, you know, go and watch their conversation because it was really interesting. But one thing I took away from that is that we definitely had a different definition, each of us, about that. Because for me, I think that you could argue that with a system that was made up at some point, could you structurally create something that did exactly the same as tarot, that wasn't 78 cards, that perhaps was, I don't know, 85? I think that you could, but then you're playing fast and loose with who makes up the rules, with how far you stray from that, and if it makes sense, and are you repeating things by that stage. So yeah, it's an interesting conversation, because even when I think about where I land on it, I can't firm up enough ground to get to a point where, without using the deck, I could say, this is non-traditional, but it's still tarot, or no, that's too far gone for me. I have to use the deck. And that in itself was, I don't know, it was like a curious realisation. Jess says, I love non-traditional tarot decks, like Logan said. As long as I can make sense of the cards, then I'm all for it. And I'm curious, for you making sense of the cards, is that, like, how much work do you want to put into that? Like this, like I said, this deck is a really good invitation of that. Like the ring for the Ace of Cups, I can get there pretty fast with this one. But like I said, what I'm realising is, firstly, I started tarot in a very non-traditional way, and I grew up reading it in a very intuitive way, and I came to learn systems structurally way later in life. And I think that it helped me read non-traditional decks and work with meaning in a way perhaps that people read Oracle but they're not utilising their tarot system knowledge. And it's the blending of the two, isn't it, without feeling, I suppose, too stressed, too like you don't want to expend too much energy doing that. If a deck's just zapping your energy while you're trying to make out each card, it's not a deck for you. So that line interests me. Like, could it be that the ring as the Ace of Cups wouldn't make sense to you, but then if the book helped you make sense of it, that would be enough, and that would stay in your mind? For me, I want to be able to make sense of them with or without the book, but I expect the book to do a bloody good job if it's non-traditional, especially this non-traditional. Let's see. So Jess says, for me, a tarot deck is a structure of major arcana or the equivalent, a suit of minors around the elements, and a court system. Yeah. See, this is what I said originally, but I feel that there's a bit more leniency there for me, because it gets a little bit hazy in some of the decks that I have. Not so much that there's not those three structures, but there's not always a clear expression of them. And then, like I said, I don't own the 𝗺cie Tarot, so I probably shouldn't keep bringing it up, but I know that there's more major arcana. I should probably caveat that with, I have used that deck in readings. My friend owned it, and I have had the experience of using it enough to have formed an opinion further than just watching people's videos. And I'd say I'm pretty sure that it's got extra major arcana, and it didn't feel anything but tarot to me. Again, very like, I'm not offended if people don't feel that way. If you're worried about offending me, then you haven't been watching my channel long enough. Unless you're the people who just keep thumbsing down all of my videos, which in that case you can get bent. You think it depends on the deck. You're really intrigued. If it really intrigues and incites you, then you're up for studying it and putting in the work. Yes. And there is something about that, that connection right off the bat, isn't there? Because this is probably no surprise to people, or a secret, again, if you've known me for a while, but like, I understand the 𝗪𝗿_𝘁𝗵 imagery, and I understand what it's expressing. I actually find it quite, and I'm very thankful for the system, because I wouldn't have all these other decks. Not all of them, because not everything comes from the fucking 𝗪𝗿_𝘁𝗵 either, but just to get that out of the way, that little that little disclaimer, because people get offended by my lack of joy in the 𝗪𝗿_𝘁𝗵. I find it to be quite still, actually. One of the complaints that people had about the Star Child Tarot was that people looked kind of motionless. And I don't think the 𝗪𝗿_𝘁𝗵, in my relationship with it, feels any different. And then it feels even further removed from the world that I live in and the vibe. And because I didn't grow up on that deck, I don't have the intrigue or the excitement. So even though it's literally the system that it's talking about, it does so little for me that the reading experience lacks something that other decks that are far more abstract don't. And it's not because I lack a system, because I work, I'm very well versed in the 𝗪𝗿_𝘁𝗵. I work with numerology, I work with the elements, I'm studying cartomancy and other layers of the 𝗪𝗂. It's not lacking system that I want, it's just the passion's not there. Let's change the deck up. A Merciful Mermaid says, a tarot deck can totally break the mold for me. Sometimes you don't know how you're going to end up working with a deck until it's in your hands. A new approach to reading in general can emerge, for sure. I have another deck that's quite popular that I would argue is a non-traditional deck, but not anywhere near as much as the 𝗪𝗿 Tarot. I think this is the most non-traditional deck I own, and it's fucking, I love it. But it's a bit much for other people, so I wouldn't read for others with it, because I think people find it difficult. But one that I would say is like non-traditional in a kind of, it's pretty welcome in the tarot community and considered a tarot, is the Muriel Tarot, which I fought off for the longest time. To you, the 𝗪𝗿_𝘁𝗵 is just another deck. It's great and I love it, but I don't think it's the foundation of tarot. Yes. Mainly because it came after other decks, right? And don't get me wrong, I am not the person to go to for tarot history lessons. It's find someone else. I don't know, Robert M. Place seems like a good place to start. But from what I know of the Muriel Tarot, all of which is upside down, of course, this is a mixing of systems. Is a freaking love letter to the tarot as far as I'm concerned, because you can, and I heard people say this before I owned it and probably rolled my eyes thinking that they were in some kind of weird Muriel cult, and then I joined the Muriel cult and started saying the same things. You can tell that it was worked on for as long as it was. Like, it's, I echo the cliche, but it is non-traditional in that, as far as I understand it, there is a blending of systems. And again, you get into some pretty abstract cards. This is not what the Five of Cups looks like in the 𝗨 or in the 𝗪𝗿_𝘁𝗵. Same for the Seven of Swords. The superpower of this as a non-traditional deck, but still a very tarot system informed one, aside from just everything that she said did so damn well, like the symbology and the colours and the layers and the fucking myth and you name it. The religion I don't love as much, but then you know what, religion informs myth and story and yada yada yada. So you know, as I'm not anti it, I just I don't like what religion does to humanity or what we do with it. But that aside, she makes a very good book, and there are points in the book where I've read them and kind of been like, that doesn't interest me. But I'm talking about we're really getting into tastes now, like fussy tastes as well. Like, oh, that doesn't interest me is a very it's a very privileged little position to have in regards to a book. But what is amazing about the book is there's always something in there, even if it boils down to the poem. In fact, I will grab the book. There are penises and tits all over this, by the way, so if that for some reason offends, you've had your warning. You know, if I can ever monetize my YouTube, then the likelihood of that happening with my mouth and all of the things I show is not likely, is it? So, am I gonna find... You can tell I haven't picked this up for a while. The kings are in the back, are they? Just hunt the penis in the kings. Here we go. So here, and I'm not going to read all of it, we have a description of, it will be the story that's being told in the picture, the mythology, any religion related to it, any kind of just conceptual stuff. Not too much either. This book looks a lot more overwhelming than it actually is. You don't swear on your channel, but it's because you constantly remind yourself not to. Yeah, I'm not at the stage of monetization yet, so I'm all right. Although if I was, I wouldn't be able to back monetize, if that's a thing. I don't know. I enjoy swearing. This is the problem. I enjoy it. I find it to be just a sumptuous extension of language and expression, and that is my problem. It's me. I'm in the King of Discs. This is like a very kind of... It's interesting because I feel like it's almost gluttonous, this card, but I don't mean that in like a sinful way either. It's kind of peak gluttony before you've gone to the bad place. I don't know. But yeah, this isn't as overwhelming as it looks. So you've got this piece, and then you've got the upright and reversed. But what are the cards that I'm thinking of? So that's the courts. Is it the minors that have, or is it the majors? You can see every single cut, right? It's just some of them. It just seems to depend. There's fair treatment across the board of all of these, and then you get these, and I really like the little blurbs, poems, quotes that have been added throughout. I actually kind of wish they were on all of the cards because I really thought they were. But I haven't read the book cover to cover, obviously. So yeah, a lot less overwhelming than it might first have you think. But that is like, not only is there so much to delve into in this artwork, to the point that it can be overwhelming, or there's another word that I'm thinking of, but my brain's left the building. Nope, it's gone. But the book is going to help. Like, the book is going to help. And I think that if I was going to create a non-traditional deck, that's where I'm looking to really not just make sure I'm still expressing the tarot in the cards, even if it's in a way that's really abstract from the other ways that people have expressed it, but I want to back that up with a book. And I think that's when a non-traditional deck really finds its feet and seems to be more welcome in the community. And this one still retains the 70, like what Jess said, it's the 78 cards, it's the courts, it's the minors, it's the majors. Swearing is a blast. It is. Yeah, I know a guy who's monetized his and he said boobs and it flagged his video. Oh my gosh. For saying boobs? Like, it's a body part, YouTube. And also, the likelihood is that the dude probably has their channel flagged for adults anyway. Like, mine is set, which is one of the reasons why my reach is not great, is set that it's not child-friendly content, because that came about however many years ago, and I was like, well, I ain't getting in trouble, so I just set it as that and was done with it. So yeah, ridiculous. Jess said, I've watched a couple of interviews with Mary White and she mentions that her book is only a snapshot of all the material she wrote for this deck. I've heard that. I would love, like, wouldn't it be cool if she released like a massive book? And I am really hit and miss with that, because I've done some massive books over my time and just been like, oh, that was hours lost. But I would read that. You're in a group and need all the info. Oh, you're a Muriel groupie and need all the info. I was going to say, if you're in a group, maybe we should make a group. We should make a Discord server, Jess. I would love to hit her up for more information, but I'm sure the last thing she wants is little tarot groupies fanning around her, but still. So yeah, this, I feel like, would some people agree then that this is a non-traditional tarot deck, but non-traditional enough that everyone seems to agree it's still a tarot, and the systems are perhaps mixed, but still clear, well-defined, well-expressed, well held by the creator. And the book is a solid addition, that this has been very welcomed into the community. That's not to take away from the fact that, you know, some decks are just freaking amazing, and this is an amazing deck, which is another reason why it's so popular. And that doesn't mean everyone has to like it, but I think that even before I was a convert, I could see how much time had gone into this particular deck, especially if you have ever created your own artwork or thought about expressing something like a myth or a story or a system through that artwork. Then you know that some people do things quicker than others, but of course the more time spent, especially with so much history and layers of sort of occult knowledge wove into there, as well as, like I said, the myth and religion and the existing tarot structures, it's going to take time, and I think that you can tell with that one in particular. So how long have we been live for? How long? Does it tell me? It does. Ooh, 53 minutes. Right. I should probably start wrapping this up, but I've got a couple more, so perhaps we'll just talk about a couple more quickly. We'll do it quickly. I like the 𝗵𝘁 Tarot as another one to have a discussion about whether it's actually a tarot deck or not. And it's not quite a hot take. I don't really do hot takes. I'm like a weak coffee when it comes to that. I end up getting stuck in all the nuances and possibilities, and I'm like, I could be explained as the grey area or liminality, because it's like, I'm going to discuss all of the possibilities. But as close as I get to a hot take, I would say that the 𝗺 Tarot to me is more of a solid tarot deck than the 𝗵𝘁 Tarot. There, I said it. Some of them are very obvious. This seems like a very tarot-y Ten of Pentacles. This is a deck that's a mixture of pre-existing art and some very, very clearly created for the deck artwork. And I'm sure that I couldn't 100% get it right every time, but I'm mostly certain when I'm looking at the cards whether it was pre-existing or not. Now, I really like it because this for me is a challenge. It is a glorious, not a bad, not a challenge like walking up a hill too high and being out of breath. Like a challenge as in a way to push myself further, to really enjoy the stretching of what I understand tarot to be and how I expect it to sometimes look, versus how I can weave tarot from the visual stories that I'm being offered and not what I'm expecting to see. I don't know if that makes sense. When you said weak coffee, it reminded me that I had a coffee I forgot about starting to go cold. Thanks, you're very welcome. Happy to help. I'm shocked I haven't got the Hush Tarot. I don't know what's tripping me up. I can tell you what tripped me up, Jess. It's the Lovers card. It is a beautiful depiction of Hindu deities. I'm really hoping I'm remembering that correctly because my brain is on the out. And I am in no knowledge of the creator's background, religion, other artwork outside of this, interests, intent, any of that. So I am upfront giving my ignorance. And the thing that I love about this card is that it's not another Adam and Eve depiction, because my gosh, have we done it 1,000 times. So if it's not going to be a different version of the Lovers and it's going to still be like very religiously infused, then I'm very, very, very up for seeing other deity. My thing is that there's no other obviously apparent religious, mythic or other ties throughout the whole entire deck. And so from that lens, it sticks out. Like, just incredibly so. Not art-wise, just conceptually and thematically. It's just curious to me. I'm not a massive fan of the Lovers card. Just across the board. I find it a very strange depiction. And whilst we do make choices about people and relationships, I almost feel like sometimes boiling it down to what's often very romantically infused as well kind of takes something away from the expansiveness of the Lovers card. But that aside, the rest of the deck is incredibly obscure and I love it. And I think you would probably love it for the same reasons, Jess. It's like animals and it's decay and it's a bit fey and it's a bit freaking weird and it's a bit dark and it's a bit dreamy. But it's a bit bloody strange, and sometimes finding the meaning from the artwork is a working experience indeed. Or you can be very comfortable with the fact that, you know what, sometimes when we read tarot, we're not reading tarot in that way, and whilst it calls itself a tarot deck, what you're doing with it is something akin to between reading tarot and reading an oracle and reading artwork and storytelling and journeying with card art. And if you're comfortable to kind of get into that squishy middle place, then that's a lovely place for the Hush Tarot too. These are cards to me that were obviously drawn for the deck. Versus, like, look, that's the Two of Swords, and here's the Four and the Five of Swords. And I've seen the big version of this artwork because it's very cool. Because I feel like they tried to cut out the third cat here, but didn't successfully do it. So yeah, it's Is it a tarot deck? Yes. It says it's a tarot deck. It's got all the structure. It's got all of the stuff that a lot of people would say makes it a tarot deck. But the artwork is so unrecognizable sometimes to the meaning and in the book. And again, I'm not shitting on the deck. I'm just having opinions on it and based on my experience. Like, I still own the deck. I'm using it every month. I'm enjoying it. But it doesn't have to mean that I love every single facet about its whole entire being. And yeah, the book and the visuals don't sync up enough for me. This is not a Muriel situation. And like I said, I would argue that there's something about that 𝗳𝗿 tarot that feels more cohesive to me than the 𝗵𝘁 tarot. So I think that that's one of the things I wanted to say before like I ended as well, is that if you looked at them, especially because the 𝗵𝘁 tarot has, it's a mass market, so it's a US games done deck. There's a lot of reasons why people would expect it to be more traditional, and yet the 𝗳𝗿 tarot for me is a more cohesive, familiar experience to tarot than this one. Everyone's saying they have no business buying any more decks. Yeah, mood. I'm not really bringing stuff in at the moment, full stop anyway, other than I'm very excited. I will share with yous because, I don't know, maybe you'll be excited with me. I won which has been a long time since I've won something. I won a giveaway by one of my favourite creators. And I've actually been reading her poetry book today. And I love her, and she has an animal oracle deck. But I firstly am not in the business of buying stuff at the moment, and secondly I'm in the UK, which means that we get customs, but we also get extra like postal charges on top of those. So you got the customs, the taxes and the postal charges, and so on average it makes a deck around 45% more of what it costs, and the customs includes the shipping fees, which are of course high if they're coming from abroad. So as she is a Canadian creator and her deck isn't stocked in England, I literally only buy from the UK now, unless it happens to be like a birthday present. But I won a giveaway that had from her with all this other glorious stuff in and her little oracle. And so I took the opportunity to buy her other deck as well, which means I'll be getting both of them and be getting her animal oracle. So I do have 2 new decks coming. The animal oracle, which my partner gave me the money for, which I don't know if it's going to count as like a really early birthday present. I'm not attached to whether it does anyway. My birthday's not till August, but it was like an opportunity to get the deck. And then the one that I won with this giveaway, which is her little one, and it's a word deck, and all the words begin with RE words, so like reclaim, rebirth, regurgitate, resume, review. So freaking cool. So yeah. Before we finish, and we are wrapping up because I've been on for an hour now, a couple of non-traditional tarot decks that are far more traditional, but technically, they're still non-traditional. Let's move this out of the way. And I thought to really encapsulate the whole conversation, it would only be fair to show these and discuss 𝗺𝗿. Now, I think the World Unknown is an interesting stretch because that's the World Unknown. This is the Wildwood Tarot. But I wanted to bring it back to like when a tarot deck almost looks like it's traditional, but it's not quite. And the reason that this is not quite is because, firstly, it's not always recognisable for the 𝗪𝗿𝗪𝗔, which is the structure it's using. 10 of Swords, completely recognisable. I should probably hold them up because of the angle. getting a bit more pippish here with the Four of Pentacles, but we do have the concept of like entanglement and sort of coming together and a structural integrity. Very abstract world card in my opinion, although no one ever says that, but like if we just, it's a circle, and I think that's what it does to our brain. It's like, oh, it's a circle and it's got all of the rainbow in it, but like otherwise it's I don't know. This is one of my like OG decks, by the way. But it's kind of this weird mix of like, it's an animal deck, but it's not. It's a pip deck, but it's not. It's a 𝗫𝗫𝗁𝗀𝗃 deck, but it's not. And a lot of people like myself tried to learn or reacquaint or immerse themselves in the 𝗫𝗁𝗀𝗃 system with the Wild Unknown Tarot, only to find that the guidebook would not help them do that properly, and that a 𝗫𝗁𝗀𝗃 book would not traverse enough without some prior knowledge. And so the Wild Unknown is one of those really interesting, it's actually pretty tarot-ish, but it isn't traditional. It's just not. And the reason it's not traditional is because whenever anyone tries to learn the 𝗫𝗁𝗀𝗃 with it, they have a time. They have a time. It's challenging. And then, because we couldn't leave it out, I've got so many decks around me that I could have continued, but like I said, replayability. We've got the Wildwood Tarot, which if you want to know the ins and outs of this, I recently did a review of this. I name my reviews Strange Things currently because that's just my style, but it always says review in the title somewhere, even if it's right towards the end. So I think I called this Experience in the Wildwood, and then it's got review. So I talk about it in full there because it's the same majors. They're numbered the same in the deck, but if you read the guidebook, you can explore them in a different way. But then you get to the minors, and the minors have keywords, and some of the minors are incredibly 𝗫𝗁𝗀𝗃, and then the others are unrecognisable. So here we go, that's what I was looking for. The Five of Cups in a 𝗫𝗁𝗀𝗃 card, using that as an example because it's the most familiar for a lot of people. It's got kind of like a sad depiction, someone like bowing their head or something like that. A couple of cups are spilled, 2 I think, 3 standing, or vice versa. And it talks about a difficult time emotionally. It pulls a lot on the fives being a challenge. Now in the Wildwood, you can see that this is called ecstasy, and there's a whole different experience going on here. It's quite ritualistic actually with the pentagram words, and it looks like we've got either a talking stick or a rattle, and then some kind of shamanic staff as well, and a ritual's being undertaken. And you could argue that ecstasy in terms of an emotion has quite it has short longevity. You know, it's not something we can just continuously feed into because we'd literally wipe out. So in that way, it's still a big emotion in the same capacity, but it's just completely just not the meaning of the card. And it's not a card that wants you to put the 𝗫𝗁𝗀𝗃 on it. And the book completely explains to you why it's called ecstasy, what their meaning is. And the interesting thing is, even though quite a lot of these cards feel very 𝗫𝗁𝗀𝗃, of the few of them that don't, the deck still retains its balance between neutral, more challenging cards and more sort of uplifting cards. And so this is another prime example of a deck that kind of looks very traditional almost, you know, it walks like it, it talks like it, but there's something about it that's not quite traditional. Other than obviously it's not a clone. So yeah, I think that that's gonna wrap it up for me, because I've definitively run out of energy at 70 minutes. I don't think that's bad, to be fair. I'll take it. I'm quite proud of that. I hope that that was enjoyable, and people will enjoy it watching it back, because I want to hear your opinions, hot takes, cold takes, medium. You're welcome to disagree with me. We don't have to agree to share space in the community. It's a novel concept, I know, but and yeah, thank you to the lovelies who hung out and kept the chat interesting as well. I think that I named everyone who spoke. So Jess reads cards, Merciful Mermaid Tarot, and of course Larkin Legend, for those who don't know who I meant by Logan. Oh, I'm glad. It's always fun to like listen to a YouTube video whilst you're doing something like a mundane task. So it was lovely to have you here. It helped add something to the video. I'm going to shoot off now and keel over on my bed. And I'll be back with some more pre-recorded and more structured content sometime soon. So other than that, I'll see you soon, folks. Bye.